Welcome to the Aviation Pros Podcast, the go-to platform for professionals in the aviation industry. Powered by AviationPros.com, the leading source for comprehensive news, insights, and data on airport operations. Whether you're focused on airport management, improvement programs, ground handling, equipment, MRO, or FBO operations, we've got you covered with the expertise and resources you need to stay ahead. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Aviation Pros Podcast. I'm Joe Petrie, Editor-in-Chief of Airport Business and AviationPros.com. Today's episode is an installment in our special series focused on the Ukrainian aviation system and the efforts needed today and tomorrow to rebuild and enhance the civilian system, which was decimated with Russia's unprovoked invasion of the sovereign nation in 2022. Tonci Peovic is a man who knows exactly what it takes to rebuild an airport from the ashes of war. In 1995, he was tasked with restarting and rebuilding the Dubrovnik Airport in Croatia on the heels of the Balkans War. He is now part of the Ukrainian Aviation Recovery and Reconstruction Program, which is working with Ukrainian aviation leaders to get them started on the path back to functionality and success. I spoke with him about the challenges he faced restarting an airport after a war and what's likely in store for Ukraine when the conflict finally comes to an end. Appreciate you being able to speak with us today on this topic because it's such an important one, what we're seeing in Ukraine, and having somebody that's had experience having to try and restart an airport after there's been some sort of a military challenge in a region or anything like that. Can you talk a little bit about, tell me what were some of like the typical effects of war on airport infrastructure, operations, and staff can be, just based on your experience with Dubrovnik?
First of all, I think that it's not an easy task, because this is something that you have the business as usual, and then war comes, destroy your business, destroy your resources, and then you have to start usually immediately after the war finish or almost finish, because you never know if there will be some additional fighting. It's just your expectations. So you are just playing with the time and playing with the security and safety. But on the other side, I know how important it was to open Dubrovnik Airport and to connect citizens of Dubrovnik with the motherland, because there was a part of the territory that was not accessible by car, so Dubrovnik people can fly to capital city and abroad only by using the airport capacity. Having said that, I get the order that I have to put the airport back in operation in 1 month period, which is 30 days. Which is almost impossible if you go strictly and following all these international standards. So you have to improvise a lot. So this is something that you have to be sure that whatever you are improvising, it should be minimum risk for safety and security. So that is why we were following at that time ICAO, International Civil Aviation Organization standard, so-called Annex 14. That require all the minimum standards on the airport. First, what we did was cleaning the landmines, because we didn't know how many explosive materials were in the field around the runway, but also in the object of the airport, because the airport was partly burned out, destroyed, equipment stolen, windows broken. There is no documentation that you can just relay to see what are the technical requirements for any resources that you need to have and to repair. So that is why at the beginning we have to improvise with the minimum comfort standard, but always at that time, almost 3 years, we were operating the airport without knowing if another grenade is going to fall nearby. And for that purpose, we even organized a terminal building, which was not in the fancy facade with the glass. It was a building still that was somehow protected, understanding that in any moment we can stop boarding passengers in case that we get information that it's unsafe to operate. So I think that the same will be also in Ukraine. So we have to think about priority first. It's impossible to open all airports in the same moment. So we have to prioritize and to see which airport are first priority. Then we have to repair whatever is necessary with external support and also internal capacity to repair something that we can put airport in operation as soon as possible, but without thinking about building new terminals and new runways and other, because it takes years and we don't have time. People need to fly. People need to be connected for cargo traffic and for passenger transportation, for political meetings, for anything else. For all these, you have to go with priorities of reparation. And talking about priority of reparation, first is airside reparation. That means runways, strip area, approach, landing lights, air navigation system, air traffic control. And then you come to the ground handling equipment, which can be ordered in advance, even before the end of the war, and stored somewhere in the warehouse, waiting for the moment when it will be delivered. You have to have minimum staff trained, and this can be a big problem. We had the same problem also after the war, because not all people are going to be available on the field, on the airport field, once when the war will stop. Part of the people will be injured, will be handicapped, will be PTSD, and we have to find another people who are going to temporarily or constantly change this stuff, who can do business until we stabilize with human resources. And this is the big challenge as well. I think that in the first moment we should select and find the way how to choose these people, how to train these people, and how to be sure that from very first moment they are capable to provide services required on the international level for safety and security. I'm talking about passenger handling and aircraft handling. And then you come on the third priority, which is resources, material resources like terminal building, like parking cars, like all the equipment necessary to handle passenger, at the end, including also food and beverage and shops and services and concessionaires on the airport. So there are several priorities. But again, I think from my experience, the first will be to set up the priorities of the airport to be put in service, not repaired, but put in service. Then second, to go on field and to decide what are the first steps for urgent reparation, so we can start operation as soon as possible, and then to set up the plan of reconstruction of the airport, including also maybe construction of new terminal building, which usually need master plan as well, to develop some master plan for the future. Because I suppose, and I was in Kiev airport in capital city of Ukraine several times, and you can feel that still they were not in that moment very adapted to the Western standards. So this is good time now that they get international support, especially U.S. support, to build up human and material resources and to establish standards according to the needs of the future, not according to the needs of the past and the Russian system of organization of the airport and Russian standards. So this is my experience. I'm fully available to support once when we will be ready to go. I'm sure that we can start reparation of or reorganization of Ukrainian airport even before the war will be finished by several things. First, to set up the cooperation with the Ukrainian team. Second, I proposed also that it will be some kind of the mentor airport. One Western airport will be mentor of the Ukrainian airport and to establish some kind of the sister airport system. So in case that you need something, you can always find somebody who knows how to solve the problem. You can pick up the phone from Ukrainian side and discuss with some guy in Poland or in Germany or in Austria or in Croatia to help you in some specific things. Third will be to start collecting donors who are going to provide equipment. And I'm especially talking about equipment that is not available on the market. So once when you order, it takes some time for production, like fire and rescue vehicles, like pushback vehicle, like some other equipment that takes too much time to produce. In my experience, we ask European airports, especially Austrian airports, to help us with this equipment. And this was very successful because they may have a meeting in Austria. And they said, okay, we are going to help Dubrovnik Airport, but we are going to send equipment which is serviceable, not to send in the garbage, to be stored somewhere in the trash. It has to be serviceable equipment. So whatever we get from Austrian colleagues, from Austrian airport, it was fully functional and help us to jump these few years until we find money and funds to buy new equipment. Similar should be done also with the donors conference for Ukrainian airports. These equipment should be stored somewhere, ready to be delivered. Selection of the people and training of the people should start even before the war finish, when we see the signs that it is ending, probably next year or year after. We will see with new administration how quick it is going to be settled down. And the third, I'm sure that Ukrainian people are very well educated. You know that Ukraine was a great country before the war, that they were producing parts for rockets for the space. They were producing aircrafts. They were very advanced in the aviation project, and I think that we should find very knowledgeable people there. It's only necessary to select these people and to give them some training about adoption to the Western standards. These standards can be European, so-called EASA, European Aviation Safety Agency. It can be FAA, Federal Aviation Authority standard. It can be ICAO, whatever we choose. It's almost same, but then we are going to follow with the training of these people and to prepare this human capital for future airport operations.
Now, there's going to be a lot of moving pieces, just as you mentioned there, when it comes to going from wartime to peacetime and trying to get these things going. Based on your experience with Dubrovnik, what are some of the immediate action needs in order to secure and stabilize an airport coming out of a wartime environment?
First, I think that it is important to discuss with the airline, because you cannot prepare the services for unknown carrier. So the first carrier who are going to come, we will have to understand what type of the aircraft are they going to fly, what will be the frequency, are they going to fly day operations or night operations, do you need instrumental landing system, what kind of instrumental landing system, is your ATC prepared to handle these aircraft, and some other aspects, So priority is air transport movement system, so ATC. Second one is runway safety, which includes the rescue and firefighting. And the third priority will be ground handling. But all these in strong cooperation with the carriers who plan to come first. Once when you develop all these systems, once when you develop your services, then you can provide services to different type of the aircraft, different airlines, and so on. But at the beginning, it is important to discuss with the carriers who plan to start operations first.
And now there's going to be a lot of different partners involved in getting this back and getting the system back in Ukraine once everything's done as far as the conflict is concerned. Tell me, and somebody that was involved in getting these going again in Croatia after the war, the Balkan War, and a lot of these international partners like you mentioned before, tell me, how does that facilitate in helping getting these process moving forward? And what were some of the lessons that you learned doing that in Croatia that could be potentially applied in Ukraine?
Yeah, unfortunately, I think it will be similar like in Croatia, because I was in charge of reorganizing the airport and putting the airport back in operation. But at that time, Croatia Airline was the national carrier who started to fly to Dubrovnik. They have only half of the year before the war operations, a brand new airline that appeared in the market. But simultaneously, we were building also the regulator. Because without regulator, you cannot do anything. You cannot be certified, you cannot be inspected. So the regulator is also important to be set up, So I think that a big part of support to Ukrainian aviation system should be regulator to regulator support. Shall it be FAA, it should be EASA, but just to select people who are going to work there, to see what facilities they have, what documentation they have, are they trained to do their job? Because once when the airport want to get certified or get a license, they have to submit to someone. They cannot submit to the foreign agency. They have to submit to national agency. And if this agency does not exist or is not capable to follow the airport, then you have a problem. So that is why we have to go in the minimum 3 simultaneous actions. One is ATC, second one is regulator, and third one is airport infrastructure. In strong cooperation with the airline, which I suppose at the beginning will be some foreign carrier, because I don't think that Ukrainian airline is going to operate at the first day of operations.
Mm-hmm. So what kind of strategies did you use in your experience to assess damage and plan reconstruction efforts once the war was over? And how might these be able to be applied in Ukraine?
Again, from the beginning, you have to start building a master plan. master plan is projecting what kind of business are you going to handle in the future, how many passenger you can expect according to market share, according to catchment area in your region, according to some history figures, and then according to that to plan the infrastructure you need. Once when you get this master plan, which is also including forecast, the traffic forecast, and required human and material resources to perform this master plan, then second will be to make a gap analysis. Gap analysis is what we need in the future and what we have now. And once when you see that in gap analysis you have some structure, condition of the structure is important. Sometimes if you invest into existing structure, a very old one, which is almost at the end of the life cycle, it's just wasting money. So that is why every piece of the equipment that will fill into the future master plan have to be evaluated and have to be assessed to understand, are we going to demolish and build a new piece of infrastructure, or we are going to repair, or we are going to completely move to another direction. But this is a long-term process, because development of the master plan is usually a process that takes, let's say, 1 year. It can be done maybe a little bit shorter, but there are so many uncertainties, and there are so many elements that you cannot completely fulfill into the master plan after the war. It's easy to produce master plan for JFK because we know what was in the past and we can expect what can be in the future. But in the country when there was no air traffic for several years, with so many refugees that go from Ukraine outside that are probably willing to come back, or families are going to exchange, there are so many uncertainties that it will be a very difficult problem for the company who is going to produce this master plan for each airport. And additionally, strategy of airports should be established by regulator again to fulfill that every piece of this element would fit into the mosaic of the future of aviation system in Ukraine. Maybe many airports that were usually military airports in the past, when Ukraine was a separate country from Russia, they were converted into civilian airport. Not every of them were successful. Some of them were suffering with lack of traffic, lack of money, and so on. So it is the task of the regulator to set up also master plan of aviation system together with the producers of the master plan of each airport. And then according to that, coming back to my previous comment, to set up what is the gap. So what we need in the future, what we have now, and are we going to build, are we going to repair, are we going to reconstruct? So this is why a lot of knowledge is necessary to cooperate with the teams in Ukraine, each airport, according to the priorities that will be set up. And this is a process that definitely will take more than 10 years for all reconstruction. You cannot plan less, this is my experience, because there are so many changes that happen in the meantime that, let's say, completely reparation and reconstruction will take 10 years. But putting back airport in operation is urgent and have to be done as soon as possible. I'm talking about months. Again, not every airport, but several airports according to priority of Ukrainian government.
10 years to bring them back into service or to completely rebuild. That is an astounding amount of time, but it does make a lot of sense that it would take that, especially if the damage has been done over the last several years and as far as the conflict's concerned. When it comes to those first couple of months and getting these airports ready to go again, what are the most significant obstacles? Is it just getting the materials and the equipment that's necessary to handle the aircraft that are going to come in, or is it a people challenge and not having the workforce that was once there before the war?
Yeah, it's much easier with equipment than with the people, because you need time to develop people and to train people. In my experience, we have some people that work on the airport. They were still in the army. They didn't left the army back to the civilian services. We have many people also that work on the airport. They left. They go to Serbia. They move from Croatia to another. So we have lack of positions of some people, and we didn't have spare people that can just jump in because they were not trained for this. And, it takes some time to be a pilot, I will not feel safe if somebody is going to fly the aircraft with myself on board if he didn't have experience of, let's say, 1,000 hours flying. It's same also with operating, for instance, pushback of the aircraft. I mean, this guy driving this pushback vehicle is driving a full aircraft with the passengers, and has to be capable and experienced to do it. And experience comes with time, which is completely different than buying equipment. You send money, you get equipment, and it's done, So that's why human capital is much longer time to develop. And this can be done also by some kind of exchange with experts who are going to come with the system, train the trainer on field, and then these people who are going to stay on field can train employees slowly, day after day, and it will take some time. So I'm talking about development of the staff working on the airport, 6 months process at least, with support, external support of some specialists, experts who can come on the field. It can be done quicker, but self-trained people at least 6 months.
And then on top of that, too, especially Ukraine, I imagine this is going to be a very big challenge, is just going to be the safety and security efforts of both the workers and the passengers that are going to be coming through a terminal, especially given what we know if the war were to end tomorrow and Russia's covert actions that they tend to take place in some of these places where something might have happened or there might be some bad blood. What are some of the, from your experience of having gone through this and the potential flare-ups that can happen after a conflict, what are some of the most important things that an airport needs to do in order to make sure that everyone's going to remain safe and it's not going to get embroiled in something that is happening from outside or something left over from the conflict that just ended?
You know that there is a big difference between safety and security. So safety should be done by good condition of the runway and good rescue and firefighting vehicle and equipment and people who are going to be trained to do something. But in that area, again, coming to my experience, landmines and unexploded grenades that can be found somewhere in the grass in case of aircraft runway excursion, it can be a big problem. So the cleaning of the area around the airport, inside the fence, but also outside the fence, is crucial. It has to be done thoroughly. I know sometimes it's not easy because some of these bombs even do not contain metal systems, so it cannot be detected by these mine detectors. So there are some special teams of the people who have to dig almost every centimeter of the airport outside of the concrete area, outside of the asphalt area, to be sure that there are no landmines in that area. Second one is outside of the airport is supply of electricity, water, and sewage water. Sometimes it's also damaged, and you cannot easily operate if you don't have a reliable source of energy. Communication as well. Now it's with the Wi-Fi and with the satellites, it's easier. But in my time, it was a big problem also to establish normal communication because we have only, I think, 10 telephone lines, and every airport have 1,000, not 10. At that time, we didn't have even cellular telephones or minimum number of cellular telephones. So water, electricity is crucial. Road access is also crucial, and that's why all these elements have to be repaired because nobody is going to stay at the airport after landing. They have to go somewhere, and that's why my forecast of 10 years is not too long, because it doesn't depend only to the airport, it depends also to the energy and infrastructure outside of the airport necessary to operate the airport on safe time. For security problem, you know that security is done by international standards, and every airport is doing on the same way with all passengers. Sometimes we have high-risk flights with the special procedures, but information about high-risk operations we get from intelligence, so it's not the airport business. We just apply for a different screening process in case that we get information that we are in alert. After the war, we can expect some terrorist activities, definitely, from the conflict parties. You can also expect some, unfortunately, with the unhappy veterans who get sick because of PTSD also, they can do something, so definitely this is some kind of the increased threat for security as well, but this is something that intelligence is going to have. So cooperation between Ukrainian intelligence and some foreign intelligence can solve the problem, and we on the airport, we know how to handle these security procedures to make it safe for flying.
And that this is not only just the development of people, the development of infrastructure, your 10-year, timeline that it's going to take to get everything back to rebuilt. That's obviously going to cost a lot of money that the Ukrainian country does not have right now after having to pay for a war for the last couple of years. Tell me, what kind of role can the international entities play in helping get Ukraine back up and running and rebuilt, and some of these different players that you've mentioned that need to be a part of this entire process?
For sure. This is a good point you mentioned, because once when you start operation, definitely that you will have much higher cost than revenue, especially because these airlines will have probably a low load factor at the beginning, So it's also a problem who is going to cover this gap between revenue and cost for the airline. And second, who is going to cover this difference between revenue and cost in operational hours of the airport. So some OPEX, some operational capacity should be offered not only to the airport, but also to the airline, to understand how much money we need to operate the airport with very low operational number of passengers, but still to operate it on safe and secure way. I don't honestly know who can finance this, but without such a financial capacity, it's not feasible that the airport can operate. Because people have to get paid, you have to pay electricity, you have to pay fuel, you have to pay security services, whatever necessary. So somebody had to give this money, because the money will not come from the airlines and from the passenger in the first several years of operations. Until the load factor of the airlines will grow, until you can charge the airlines according to your charging policy, and until you collect necessary revenue to pay all these costs. So again, not only that airport, but also some airlines should get some funds required to come to break even if we need to have a smooth operation at the beginning.
And that not only is it getting the airport going, but there's also going to be the fact of getting people in the air again. That's going to be a big challenge, as this, I imagine, as well. What are the steps that need to be taken in order to approach to restoring trust among the airlines, the passengers, all the stakeholders? And, what did you go through in your case in Dubrovnik? And what kind of advice would you give to the Ukrainian aviation leaders and how to handle this?
I think this will be political. Think, because at the beginning, I remember when we start operation only with Croatia Airline. That was flying from between Dubrovnik and capital city, and capital city was a hub. So Zagreb was a hub where passenger can just transfer from one flight from Dubrovnik to international flights. This is the way probably that we will see also the future flights from Ukrainian airports to some Western hubs, and then to transfer from that hubs to international flights. We didn't have some subsidy for the tickets, so it was, let's say, commercial tickets. Even at that time, Croatia gets some money to cover the cost of operations, but I'm not very familiar how much money they get and how much does it reflect to the purchasing power of the people. I think that once when you start operation, there is no substitution from aviation traffic, because Ukrainian territory is so far away that any alternative way of transportation is impossible. You cannot just take a car and do business in some West city and come back in the same day, like you can do in aviation. So aviation will be the crucial for doing business and doing reparation of the Ukraine in the future. Additionally, if we will have some peacekeeping army or soldiers, what we have also in Croatia after the war, and we can expect also that it will be then also it will be in the Ukrainian as well. Then some military flights will be also expected on the airport, and for that military flights you have to have also safe and secure operations. They have special rules, but still some safety and security is necessary to be provided to these military operations as well. I'm talking about peacekeeping forces.
Yes, of course. And I know that it's very early because we've just talking about the war ending and the 10-year timeline. But tell me just even a little bit more of a positive looking at this, hopefully into the future, is what kind of opportunities are out there for the Ukrainian airports 10 years down the road when these things are rebuilt? How can they build a system now that is going to better integrate them into the West or into the European economy and be able to provide incredibly robust transportation hubs for years to come after this is long history in the past, this conflict?
Yeah, before the conflict, Ukraine was not very integrated in European system, so they were a little bit like a former Russian state. And if you land in Kiev airport, at the time you can immediately see some images that reminds you to the whole Russian system. But this was not the obstacle that Ukrainian International Airline was partially owned by the Austrian investor. So still they started at that time some kinds of integration of the system to the West. I was acting also as a security auditor in Ukrainian airport Kiev to understand how much do they provide security system on behalf of the European Commission. And I must say that they were doing very, very good job by integration. They have very motivated people to do it, and I'm sure that they will be more motivated in the future. But still there is a huge gap that has to be filled with integration. Again, aviation is crucial for communication for people from Ukraine, but also from the West. Ukraine is a huge country with many resources that can be activated in the future, and activation of all these systems should be done if we have a communication. So that is why I think one of the first priorities will be infrastructure, which is infrastructure for energy, communication, but also infrastructure for aviation at the beginning of the peace in Ukraine.
And my last question for you today, obviously there's a long way to go. We don't even have all the stakeholders identified yet in terms of who's going to be able to help this. But if there's, aviation leaders in Europe or North America right now that are listening to this and thinking about what could I be thinking about doing to be able to help these my peers that are in Ukraine when this is done or when it's getting near done to help them getting going, what could it be?
It's a very good question. I think that what we can expect after the war, that we have to control the system somehow to harmonize who is doing what. Because it's obvious that also during the war and some kind of the try to support Ukraine during the war, there were some activities from different international stakeholders, from United States, from international associations, from Europeans, from country to country. And we can expect also in the future for rebuilding Ukraine that it will be the same. So orchestrating this system is very important. One thing. And second thing, to set up the system to prevent as much as possible corruption from both sides. Corruption from somebody who is going to grant something which is not useful for Ukrainian people. Sometimes even the damage can damage environment in Ukraine. And also opposite to control that all these money or this equipment which is coming to Ukraine, that it is serviceable, that it will work, and it will not be used for any kind of bribery or corruption. So that is why it's very important to harmonize the system to understand who is doing what. And once when the team from AAA was proposed for this action team that you have me on the list, was just to understand who is doing what, not to overlap, because we have limited capacity and we have to protect our job. We have to be honest, integral. We have to understand what is our task, and we have to control and what are we deliver and who can check if we deliver it properly. It should be done for every stakeholder who is going to do it in the future, and not to make a mess that nobody is controlling who is doing what. Because we know that in such conditions like war, there is no enough control of money flow, of equipment flow, of spendings, and some other, and some people can misuse this to make something that will not be very popular for people who will be involved in that process, So that is why harmonizing is important. Still, there is no such a harmonized system. We see again that different stakeholders from different environments are coming. They are proposing something, they are organizing some donors conference, some of them are talking about similar things like we are talking. Who is going to set up this? I don't know, but it has to be done before the start, because otherwise it will be a mess.
Tonci, thank you very much for your time today and talking about this important topic, and I'm sure I am speaking for everyone that's ever listening to this. I can't wait for brighter days to come in Ukraine and to hear about more of the successes, things that start to rebuild after this conflict is over.
Thank you, Joe, and thanks to all your visitors and monitors.
Thanks again for listening to this special edition of the Aviation Pros podcast. To learn more about the AAUCA, and what aviation leaders can do to help the efforts in Ukraine and the equipment needs leaders have, visit the association's website at www.aauca.org.ua. I'm Joe Petrie. We'll catch you next time.